Today, Future Forward looks at the future of where we live.
First, a hard look at the "Is New York dead?" conversation from both sides.
And then a look at the future of what we call home.
And then, can our digital lives become more human? A solution for Zoom fatigue.
I'm Stephen Rosenbaum.
And I'm Alexa Scordato. Let's launch.
Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve.
So, I think we've done a pretty good job of doing these theme shows in the end of August. And, you were the one that came up with this Where We Live idea. And I have to tell you, one of the things I love about this podcast is it gives me an excuse to read deeply on a subject that maybe I grazed across, but didn't necessarily spend the time to read into. And this one is perfect for that.
Yep. And it's timely and it's like deeply personal for me. So my lease is ending at the end of September. And so I've been thinking a lot about home and sort of how to plan and what I value in both New York and sort of just home in general.
Okay, so 3 chapters to today's show. Chapter 1 is New York, what's on the horizon, and we're going to dig into the "Is New York dead?" conversation. Then chapter 2 is the future of where we live and how life and home is actually changing. And then chapter 3, our friends at IEEE dug up this fabulous Zoom fatigue solution that I put at the end of the show because I thought if we put it out there as this little Easter egg gift at the end of the podcast, people will be like, wait, Zoom fatigue, I have that, and it's a good story, and one we'll get to in chapter 3. But let us start with the story that seems to keep coming back into my inbox. And I've read him on and off for years, but I mispronounce his last name. It's James there's no S, right? Altshuler.
Yeah.
Help.
I say Altucher.
All right, fair enough. So good. I'm glad it's not just me.
No, it's not just, in college, we actually had an Altschul Hall. And so I always want to say that, but it's not.
Well, and back at MTV days, Serena Altshuler was the host of MTV Unfiltered. Yeah. And so I keep wanting to put Serena's name next to James, but they're not the same. All right. So he wrote this article that started with a provocative headline, "New York is dead forever, and here's why." And then he makes an argument about how much he loves New York and why it's dead. First of all, did you read it nodding your head, or did you read it shaking your head, or a little of both?
Definitely both. I mean, I think I wanted to shake my head no, but I came out at the end more of a head nod, which made me sad.
All right, so and then we're going to go to a couple of different folks who wrote kind of responses to him that were thoughtful. But first, I'll just start with the story. So the first company I started when I was just out of college was in upstate New York, and through a series of odd circumstances, we ended up moving to New York City, and all my friends were like, "That's insane. New York will kill you. New York is miserable for business. It's the taxes will kill you. The crime, whatever." And I just wanted the company to be in New York, so we moved, and literally we doubled our business in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that, and it was not when New York was at its most frothy best when we did that move. And so, I think, well, I mostly agreed with some thoughts he had. And then there was one that I found kind of troubling and hard to disagree with, which maybe is the one we should get to because it's the nugget of it. I mean, the one I guess I disagreed with most passionately. Sorry, I'm all over the place. The one I agreed with was that the last time that New York had a downturn, which was 2008, there was really no such thing as broadband.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom would not have worked in 2008.
Right.
And so the question is, if Alexa decides she's going to move out of New York for a year and moves to, Des Moines or Cleveland or, upstate New York or Vermont, wherever she goes, and does her job effectively for a year remotely, and then says, okay, we're ready to move back, it might really be a turning point where remote work never goes away.
Right. So I think, every generation sort of has their good old days. And so this narrative around New York being lost or dead isn't new, right? Like there's one of my favorite books, Vanishing New York by Jeremiah Moss. I mean, he has an entire blog dedicated to New York City nostalgia and sort of this whole meditation on New York going extinct. You can visit it like vanishingnewyork.blogspot.com. And so I've been following this sort of storyline for a while, but I think what James's blog post really sheds light on is that, broadband and remote work is potentially either accelerating change and change that's more permanent than any previous cycle of a New York exodus that we've previously experienced.
So when I moved to New York, the story I always used to tell people back then was MTV was originally at 1630 Broadway, and then our offices moved to 1515. And I always used to tell people I could just ride the elevator at 1515 and do business all day long. Literally, there were so many different people buying and selling and pitching television programs in that elevator bank that I needed to go nowhere else. And so, I think the biggest question is, well, whatever that thing is that makes New York so special, we're putting aside all the other things, the art, the music, the theater, the dance, the politics, the parks, the dog parks, and all of that wonderfulness. Like, will there be a virtual elevator that will be so efficient that I will be able to do that much business in some virtual environment? And so far, and I've been in probably 20 virtual events in the last month and a half, 2 months. So far, the answer is no. There is nothing that resembles networking or connecting. But let's move on and talk about the people who gently pushed back on James, because they're relevant folks. So the first one is Ev Williams. So as some of our audience may know, Ev was the co-founder of Twitter and is now the founder of Medium. And he is I don't know that he's a friend of James, but I think he is. He's on James's podcast a lot. They have kind of a engaging relationship long before this. And so for him to write a response to the Our City's Dead article, even though it is gentle, he doesn't beat up James, but he mostly says, yeah, maybe not. And I was glad he wrote it. And obviously this will be in the show notes. So please feel free to read it, at your leisure. We're not going to read it to you. But I mean, to summarize what he says, he kind of checks off all of James's articles and then says, yeah, but there's this human face-to-face community thing that makes New York pretty special.
Right. I mean, culture, food, art, music, basically the highlighted piece in the article says that the biggest cities will still attract leaders in those fields because they represent the biggest opportunities. And so I don't actually look at the arguments as mutually exclusive, right? I think there's truth to what Ev is saying here, which is that cities will always attract sort of performers, cooks, chefs, like cultural leaders. But I think James's piece was sort of speaking, though, to the fact that maybe the density and the opportunity is no longer as big.
So two things. For those of you who are listening live, we'd love to have your comments or questions either on Facebook or YouTube. Just jump into the comments. We'll see them, and then we'll make them live and discuss them, or assuming they're thoughtful and interesting. The other thing is, there's a thing about Ev that's not, I'm not telling you a secret, but it's not wildly public, and that is that he picked up his family from San Francisco before COVID and moved to New York. So he'd already voted with his feet and said, you know, my company's based in San Francisco. And when he and I talked about it, he said, you know, Medium is about writing, and writers, gravitate to New York. And by the way, if you take that as a subset of his thesis, I mean, you can write in any crappy apartment anywhere, right?
Right.
I mean, you could write in Cleveland or Toledo or Des Moines or wherever the hell you are. So why would you? And writers tend to be fairly insular in their DNA as a kind of a species. So why were writers attracted to New York before COVID? Why was Ev attracted to be near writers in New York? And do those two things essentially not change at all in 18 months or 2 years?
Right. I mean, we'll see. I think what's happening is you have ecosystems being dismantled. And so let's take a recent example. I mean, Broadway is shuttered, right? There's no physical infrastructure that facilitates performance. And so what you have is now a case study in Hamilton and sort of the mass distribution of theater. And I bet there are both sides of the argument that would say that, oh no, Hamilton was 10 times better in person. And then there are other times where it's like, no, it's 10 times better on my couch because I didn't shell out $350 to get a ticket.
Yeah, no, that I disagree with you. That's a math problem, not an experience problem. I mean, I saw Hamilton on the TV. I had an opportunity to get tickets early, and because I was a schmuck, I didn't take them. And everyone I know that saw it in the theater said it was order of magnitude more extraordinary. It was great on the TV, but it would have been. I'm still regretting that I didn't see it in the theater.
Yeah, but I think what I'm saying though is like in terms of what can change, right? Is given a choice over the next 2 years, opening theaters, potentially compromising public health, versus continuing to produce theater and distribute it in a digital format. Right. That's part of the online remote broadband thing that's remarkably different about the times we're living in right now.
All right. Well, I mean, like the physicality is another whole conversation. Because we could have the same conversation about movies. You know,
right?
Why would anyone ever go to a movie theater ever again? But let's move on to so Ev chimed in. And then a guy who I don't know, Corey Kaiser, wrote a kind of a lengthy Medium piece about why New York is not dead, which I thought. I mean, I liked the granularity of how he took it apart, and maybe the headline worth talking about is he says remote work won't work. Now, having said that, companies are going to make hard decisions about how many remote workers they bring back, whether or not they make it optional or mandatory. I think we won't know for another 6 to 12 months of how much, I'm going to use a terrible word that makes me mad when other people use it, how much productivity is lost. Because people aren't near each other.
Yep.
I
buy this too, right? The arguments, the way they're presented are really extreme. James's argument says broadband, remote work, accelerating change, people won't go back. This article from Corey, I think, is saying, well, not so fast. Like change takes longer. And just because this is accelerated, you still have a class of people who can't actually translate their work online. right? You can't teach old dogs new tricks.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that I think it's just generational. I mean, I think,
Or preference even, right? It's like there's some people just don't want to be on Zoom calls all the time.
yeah. All right. So here's, maybe I'm giving away too many secrets here. So when the Media Lab works at 370 J Street, which is where our offices are, a couple things happen that are different for me. One, I commute, which gives me 30 to 45 minutes to kind of ruminate and get my day in order and listen to a podcast and make some notes. And I find that kind of transition from home to work really good for my head. That's thing one. Thing two, and this is the secret, is my floor is full of students, unbelievably smart students doing really wacky, interesting, unusual stuff. And I eavesdrop like crazy. I mean, I don't mean eavesdrop like I stand around and put my head up against the glass, but if they're talking about something as they walk down the hall, so I get this kind of constant stream of tone and language and interest and words and conversations, which I find incredibly intellectually stimulating. And I'm not sure that reading the internets comes close to that.
Right.
So, I'm looking forward to going back to that. And then, all right, so let's do the last one, because the last one was maybe the one, I thought I had it here. Maybe I don't have it pulled up. The last one was Fred Wilson. Notorious, well-known New York VC, investor, lifelong New Yorker. And I thought he made a really good argument that was pretty, I don't want to say mathematical, but and he was pretty analytical. He wasn't romantic about it. He wasn't like, New York's going to come back because the food's better. He basically said, New York's going to come back because no city does the New York thing better than New York.
That's such a New York thing to say.
I liked his argument the best. And I think that a lot of people follow him and pay attention to him, take him quite seriously. And his track record of trend spotting is extraordinarily good. I mean, almost unparalleled. So, I think that's maybe the thing I found most interesting was, for Fred to kind of go out a bit on a limb and say, because people are going to pay attention to that, right? I mean, startups are going to pay attention to that. People that want his money are going to pay attention to that. Anyway, I found the Fred argument, I don't know, heartwarming seems a little emotional, but that's kind of how I took it. All right, so now let's move to chapter 2. So chapter 2 is not New York versus other places. It's simply this whole idea of where we live. So explain to me the grandma in the backyard story.
So, I mean, depending on how familiar you are with real estate, like terms like an in-law suite or like a mother-daughter unit kind of thing, like they've been around before, but there's sort of this resurgence now of secondary homes on a property, either like garages being converted into apartments or little like tiny homes, like pop-up sheds, like prefab homes that cost like $250K to install. And this article sort of speaks to the rise of these homes as sort of alternatives to nursing homes and sort of like elder care. And so it's interesting because we didn't pull an article about it, but like there's also been this like Instagram trend on like A-frame homes. And then if you watch HGTV, there's like tiny house hunters. And so it's just interesting, right? Because it's kind of all coming together into this conversation about a few things. One, how do we want to treat our elders later in life? Two, out of necessity and safety, like what are we doing to solve for sort of COVID? But is it actually leading to sort of more long-term attitudes around familial setups?
So I have at least 2 friends that claim that they're getting an Airstream trailer, taking their kids out of school or remote learning and traveling across country over the next year. I just find that for me, there's nothing romantic in that story. Like, I'm going to live in a trailer home, drive on the highway, eat road food, be nervous about COVID everywhere I go. Like kids aren't going to have a backyard. I mean, I guess I'll go to a public park. But, I do think COVID is giving a lot of people opportunities to kind of rethink what home is and where home is and whether or not grandma should live in the backyard or whether or not we should be on the road with grandma.
Right. Yeah, and there's so many ways to do it. I mean, Airstreams, like there's a whole community of Airstreamers, which I find completely endearing.
So here's what I don't get. I mean, you and I both are fortunate enough to be sitting in really good, reliable Wi-Fi. So it means we can do this once a week, means we can do our jobs over the course of a week. But I find, how would you explain to your boss that you're driving in your Airstream and you can't make the staff meeting because you found yourself in, I don't know why I'm picking on Toledo today, but Toledo and the Wi-Fi's bad, I would think that would get old really quick. Like, I'm glad you're having a vacation while I'm paying you, but why don't you settle down somewhere where you can do remote work consistently?
I don't think it happens as frequently as you might think. As someone who's sort of bopped around as a digital nomad for a while, I don't think those excuses crop up any more frequently than like, oh, my kid got sick, or oh, I have like an emergency, or oh, I'm like going to the doctor's.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been reading a lot about the big chunks of the country that kind of don't have access to broadband, both in terms of home education and
but that's a different story. But if you're mobile, like you should actually build that in. Like, are you going to places where you can access Wi-Fi reliably?
All right. So now you're just smoking something. So you're telling me that you can look at the map and say, I'm leaving New York and I'm going to drive for 2 days and get to, wherever. And I'm going to be able to tell from some website whether or not I'm going to have good Wi-Fi when I get to Toledo.
I'm not saying that people do this as a best practice, but for me, as an experienced digital nomad, I could tell you that before plotting trips, I actually contact Airbnb hosts and I make them tell me what the bandwidth is, both up and down, before committing to a rental.
By the way, you are such a fabulous geek. By the way, that's the story of this pod right there. Do you contact your Airbnb host and ask them, and do they tell you the truth? Of course they must, because
everyone says I have Wi-Fi, but like that means nothing, right? And then yeah.
That's totally brilliant. That is literally the takeaway of the show, right there.
I mean, I've traveled through parts of France where I knew they didn't necessarily have like fiber, and so I've like avoided it, But that's me. That's just like,
So many years ago, the company that I then was running had a big announcement scheduled. It was a big press hit announcement with a lot of national media attention. And I was on my way to a conference, which I know this is going to make you very sad, but it was in Hawaii, because that's where they make conferences. And so I literally booked the flight to make sure that I had Wi-Fi on the plane, because I had to stay in touch with a bunch of different people to land this announcement. And I got on the plane and I said to the whatever, they're not the airline person, just checking to make sure there's Wi-Fi. And she said, oh no, it's out on this flight. And I turned around and got off the flight and sat down in the waiting room and rebooked a flight that said it had Wi-Fi, and was 3 hours late to get on a plane so that I could remain connected for that entire 12-hour period.
Yep.
But that was, yeah. All right. So let's move on to this next article. This is Pocket Lint. Always a fan of Pocket Lint. life in the future, tech that will change the way we live. Um, you know, this is a little bit further afield than where we live, but like space tourism. Yeah, I kind of buy that. I mean,
I could totally see it. I mean, not necessarily for the masses, but the
yeah,
privileged class will definitely be in a position to pay Elon Musk for a seat on some SpaceX flight for sure.
I did the zero gravity plane one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Highly recommend. Colonization of other planets. Well, that that would make the Airstream story minor by comparison.
Right.
Robots in space and in the workplace.
Already there. We already see robots in space. Mars rover.
Yeah. And in the workplace, I don't know if I've seen a robot yet.
I've seen those robots where they have cameras so that you can they kind of walk around in the hallways to help other remote satellite offices feel connected.
Yeah, I guess I have seen that as well. I don't know why electric self-driving cars is in here. That seems like an old news story. Okay, headline. Electric cars are nothing new. They've been on our roads now for some time. They're only getting better. Car batteries are okay, right? So electric cars, self-driving cars. I mean, I guess that means you could theoretically get in your car, tell it where you want to go, and then do a work day while the car takes you somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the use case for self-driving cars that I love most is actually helping elderly people get from place to place.
Well, I will tell you, I was Riverside Park yesterday around sunset, and I was watching the traffic on what used to be the walking biking path, and the number of different shaped wheeled vehicles was startling to me.
Mm-hmm.
Scooters, electric bike, assisted electric bikes, those one wheel things that you stand on with the pedals on either side. I mean, it was rather sci-fi. Which brings us to robot butlers. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could see it, right? Like we already have the vacuums, right? The Roombas, and it just gets more sophisticated from here. We have connected homes, right? The idea of saying, "Oh, Alexa, like turn on the lights or play whatever." I mean, it's just going to get more from here.
Do you find it incredibly inspirational, know that like all over the country, every moment of the day and night, someone is asking you to do shit for them?
My name.
By the way, if you ever decided you wanted to just be a real shit disturber, there's got to be a lawsuit. There's got to be a lawyer that would take your lawsuit saying your name has been made less, I don't know what, not less valuable, but
I'm waiting for like the longitudinal study on whether people have favorable views of Amazon Echo / Alexa. Because if it's good, that's good for me because they'll just naturally treat me better. But if they actually have a negative experience with a consumer product, it'll actually hurt me somehow.
So my vote of one, I actually like saying the name, partly because I like you and partly because I like the robot that lives in my house. That being said, before we do this show every week, I have to go shut off a whole bunch of things so that I don't indirectly speak to them and confuse the shit out of them when I talk to you. All right, we have 1 or 2 more from this list. Roads over rivers. Okay.
Kind of have that, right?
Yeah. Flying cars, Jetson's been there. Solar panel technology. Okay, this one I liked. Partly just because, I have a whole lot of electronic devices and I would like them. Like I tried to find some LEDs for my window that would just have solar panels so they recharge themselves auto-magically. Almost there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then last but not least, Hyperloop. So another Elon Musk kind of like moonshot version 7.4, but it does seem like he's building the damn thing.
Yeah, everything I've read is that it's moving forward. They did tests in Texas, I think. I mean, the technology makes sense.
I guess.
Honestly, like this feels so much easier than what he's doing in terms of sending people up into space.
Burning a hole and putting them underground?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
All the conditions are, I don't know, more known and controlled.
All right. All right. So then, last but not least, 6 themes driving the future of home plus living. Um, I like these. I like these better than the other ones because those I thought were more like dated sci-fi. So this is a PSFK blog, and let's we'll just run through them, and you holler if there's one you really want to talk about. Sustainable landscapes. You know, part of how we're going to address global warming, since it doesn't seem like we're going to change anything politically on the planet for the foreseeable future, is going to be how we evolve our ability to live in this new changed world. So I like sustainable landscapes.
Yeah, I mean, I think urban farming is like a trend that's going to continue. People who have like mini gardens or like rooftops. Yeah.
Single state of mind. People see even greater flexibility in how and where they work and live. The notion of being single will evolve from being seen as a life stage to a life choice.
Yeah. I see that. I know a lot of people who have opted into that dual income, no kids forever.
Well, that's not single. That's different.
Yeah, but I sort of couple it in the same thing. It's like being really intentional about sort of how you're going to live. It's like breaking the mold of like family, kids, suburb, house.
Are there suburbs? I guess. All right. 2 more. Super connectivity. This is essentially the 5G world in which every device is not just connected, but reliably connected and super fast.
So I can totally see this happening, but this is actually one of those things that I hope that we intentionally opt out of.
Well, my friends at Verizon would not like to hear that, but tell me why.
I just think anything that gets us more on the grid into more centralized, denser networks is going to damage our overall quality of life. And I actually think there's a class of digital citizens, early adopters, who are going to reverse this trend. Like I know plenty of friends who work in tech who opt into vacations where they are off the grid. You know, I don't think the idea of persistent connectivity is something that at least I don't want.
Yeah, I'm just hardwired that way and always have been. So, you know,
But don't you remember life pre being connected?
No.
Okay, that's fair.
My first mobile phone was a bag phone.
Mm-hmm.
It was so big that it came in what was essentially a shaving kit bag because the battery was big and the phone clipped on top of it. It was hardly mobile.
So you think more connectivity 24/7 equals good?
Oh no, I'm not saying anything pejorative at all. I'm just I'm just saying, let's leave super connectivity. It would be a good conversation for another show, and I'm a fan, and you're not, so that would be fun. All right, Uber employment. They didn't mean Uber like the car service.
No, I think they just meant that
micro jobs.
Yeah, and like the gig economy and work marketplaces like Upwork, Fiverr. The idea that you can have so many different skills and get employed to do so many different types of jobs.
So I have to say, we I don't know, 6 months ago or so, refinanced our apartment. And so I went through a banking thing, which I hadn't done in a long time. If you don't have a W-2, there's a whole chunk of the economy that just thinks you don't exist.
Right.
I don't know how you get a loan without a W-2. It was like, it was the weirdest thing. They were like, they're like, well, do you have W-2 going back 3 years and from the same employer? Because that's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I could get in a time machine, leave it to Beaver maybe. It was the weirdest thing. Um, all right, last but not least, let's do the shared economy. And then, well, there's two more. Shared economy, which I think we know what it is. Shared services, shared cars. I want to use Turo. I've decided I want to try Turo.
Which is basically like borrowing people's cars.
Yeah, but mostly because every time I go on Turo, there's a Tesla, and I'm like, yes, I want to borrow somebody's Tesla. I want to meet the person that's going to loan me their Tesla.
Yeah.
And then last, growing health and privacy concerns. Yeah. Yep.
Totally. 10,000%. If people weren't concerned about health pre-pandemic, they certainly are now. If people weren't concerned about big tech, privacy, algorithms, data, foreign governments like ruining elections, like you've been living under a rock.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. All right, so now let's move to the little blip at the end where we get to say something potentially positive and funny. So this is this article that we dug up from IEEE about a solution for Zoom fatigue and that it might be near. I have, I think, a heightened sense of aesthetic sensitivity, both in terms of how things look and also how they sound.
Yep.
So I find like the Zoom screen and people in various stages of good audio or whatever, like just at some point, I just get very, very exhausted. So
this is a filmmaker in you, Steve.
but I think it was even before that. I mean, it might have been the magician part of me that liked being able to make things appear and disappear. And anyway, so this is an option. This was, here, you explain it, because I read it twice and I found it a little bit confusing. Like, it's a demo, right?
Yeah. So hold on, let me see if I can explain it from the beginning, right? So I guess it's like the incorporation of cameras, like high resolution cameras and like VR. Would you say that?
Yeah, and they tiptoed around a hologram, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the this is the here. Well, this was the paragraph that had me jumped off the screen. Peering through VR goggles at my end, I saw a 3D representation of the coach. He was just as animated as a video sculpture, less resolved than in the flesh, but still seemed as if we were almost standing next to me. This was a demo of a coach, of a boxing coach. Like, I do think, a la Minority Report, you would have thought COVID would have turbocharged virtual reality, people with avatar, and it seems to have not yet. So the fact that it's around the corner and that there could be more engaging physicality in which, I could decide that I want to, change the dimension of how we're talking or bring somebody in. That struck me as urgently needed.
Yes, and I could see people craving that. I don't know if the tech is there. Like when I think about if I were given the choice to see you over Zoom versus see you in this hologram way, I would still feel like the hologram is artificial. Like at the end of the day, what I really want is like, I want to go to the Upper West Side and I want us to like have dinner together, right? And there's no digital experience that I think can supplant that.
There was a presentation at one of the TED conferences a couple of years ago, not that many, in which the presenter was hologrammed in and stood on stage and walked around the stage and was projected in 3 dimensions. And it was a good trick.
I mean, I can see for certain presentations, like having a full body view and having like the physicality of someone's presentation be really impactful, right? Like a CEO addressing like an all hands town hall type keynote might be effective for that. But in terms of like, I don't know, collaboration, whiteboarding, or just brainstorming in a room, doing that on Zoom is really hard if you've never met people in person.
So I'm playing the video for those of you who are watching the video as opposed to listening of the Microsoft holoportation demo. And, you know, having said that, I mean, I was expecting to be a huge fan of HoloLens and then was heartbreakingly disappointed in how crappy it was when it came out. Now, I haven't seen the latest device, so maybe it's gotten better. But, you know, just if you look at the video, it definitely does seem like having people in some kind of a meeting environment in which they're more physically present would be a good thing. So
it's like Star Trek,
yeah,
or Star Wars, right?
It's a star something for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we are out of time. Thank you, IEEE, for this hopeful but maybe just around the corner view of non-Zoom, which I think everyone after this long summer probably agrees would be wonderful.
I do want to leave people, though, with one pro tip as far as Zoom fatigue. Depending on your relationship with a person, honestly, just ask, hey, do you mind if we do videos off? And this has been helping me actually cope. People who I meet with regularly, I actually say, I'm going to do a walking meeting. And so I just, old school, have people call my cell phone and I go for a walk midday.
I wonder if that means you're more present because you're not reading email or texts or Googling or ordering from Amazon while you're in the meeting.
Yeah, I could.
Not that you would ever do that. Not that I would.
It's just her voice. I'm actually like, you actually have to be a much more active listener if the only thing that you're getting is a person's voice.
See, I have to take notes. That wouldn't work for me because I gotta be. I mean, I can't take.
I mean, it depends on the meeting, right? If you're catching up with a colleague, just to even debate about something, yeah. Anyway,
well, with that, another fabulous half hour, in this case 42 minutes with you. Have an excellent week. Stay chill. Breathe.
Wear a mask.
Watch small, tolerable portions of the RNC.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I think it's like a car accident. I have to go see what's going to happen. All right. See you next week.
See you next week.